I don't want to talk about your colleagues first. I want to talk about what you learned today and yesterday. Were you able to get testimony today? Was it useful? And what's your reaction to what you heard yesterday?
Good evening, Chris, and thank you for asking that, because that's the most important thing that happened today was that Ms. Cooper, a public servant, came forward. She was ready to testify at 10 in the morning, and despite the stunt that you described, she stuck around all day, and when she was asked to, she raised her right hand, told the truth, gave us new information that is helpful, fills in our timeline, and also just allows us to understand who was involved and not involved in the shakedown scheme. Yesterday, as you described, and I think this in part motivated this effort by the Republicans to obstruct, Ambassador Taylor, as you read in the Washington Post, and I think that statement in the Post shows that indeed there was a shakedown scheme, but it wasn't just a sharp straight line from Donald Trump to Rudy Giuliani. You see that it was also Donald Trump to Ambassador Sondland. So this goes all the way to the top with Donald Trump. It's not a rogue Rudy. You have Donald Trump with these directives trying to use your taxpayer dollars to extort the Ukrainians for his personal benefit.
What is your understanding of the argument your colleagues are making about this right now? They seem undecided between no quid pro quo, or there was a quid pro quo, or anything is fine.
Yeah. So, one, it should be noted that we passed in 2018 in Congress aid for the Ukrainians, and then a process was put in place for that aid to come to them. In many ways, aid is binary in that as soon as it's passed and signed in law by the president, the Ukrainians are waiting for it, and every second that ticks by that they don't have it, they know that they don't have it. So that in and of itself
That's a good point.
Is leverage.
Yep.
That's leverage. And we also are starting to learn about the human cost of not having that aid. We've heard now from witnesses describe that this is a matter of life and death for Ukrainians. And if Americans are, really offended and repulsed by what's happening with the slaughtering of the Turks and the green light the president gave there, they should equally be concerned that the president was leveraging this aid, and Ukrainians could have benefited from medical aid and defense aid, and they were dying because it was being held up for his personal political gain.
I want to play you something that the former Attorney General of the United States, Matt Whitaker, although he served in an interim capacity and was challenged in court about whether he was actually the Attorney General. This is what he said yesterday in apparently a guest defending the president. A little hard to tell. Take a listen.
I'm a former prosecutor, and what I know is this is a perfect time for a preliminary hearing where you would say, show us your evidence. What evidence of a crime do you have? I mean, the Constitution, sort of abuse of power is not a crime.
Abuse of power is not a crime. What do you think of that defense?
If he was in Russia, if he was in China, if he was in some other countries that I don't think we want to look like, he may be right. It is a crime. It was one of the articles that Richard Nixon faced. And I don't think any of us want to look at our children and say, I went to work today and decided that abuse of power is not a crime.
Final question. What is the timeline here? Obviously, the process complaints, I think, aren't pursued in good faith. But there is some transparency argument that at some point, this can't be behind closed doors. The American people, all of us, Republicans, Democrats, citizens, and journalists, have to hear what's happening.
You're absolutely right, and there will be a public phase. And I want to address, I think it's a fair question, why are you doing this initial phase underground? And first, I should say, 120 members of Congress have access to these hearings. Now, the overwhelming majority of my Republican colleagues who come in the morning and complain about the process, they leave and they don't stick around. I wish they would, because they would be, I think, concerned about what they hear, but they have access to be there. That is nearly more than a fourth of the Congress. But Chris, because no investigation was done by a special counsel, as in Watergate, as in the Clinton impeachment trial, Attorney General Barr punted on this, didn't want to investigate. We're going to do that first close hold investigation to see what the witnesses know. And we have evidence, Chris, recent evidence in our investigation that witnesses are working together to try and coordinate their testimony. That's exactly what we want to prevent, and that's why at this initial phase we're having it in a close hold fashion, but it will be public.